Hi, I'm Ashley Smith, and welcome to this episode of Nature in the Hills. Today we'll be talking with Rob Myllyoja about the wetland restoration project going on right here in Heritage Park. It's a perfect topic for this rainy day. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you.
So can you tell us what company you work for and what your company specializes in?
Well, I work for Hubble, Roth and Clark. We're a civil engineering firm. We do a lot of municipal civil work, but I work with their environmental engineering department, and we specialize in stream restoration, erosion control type projects, and stormwater management.
Okay, right. And how did you become part of the restoration project here in Heritage Park?
Well, I think that we were contacted by the Suburban Collection, who owns a dealership here in Farmington Hills. And we were hired by them to assist them with improvements in the city property. They're doing a large development of the new Chrysler, Jeep, Ram, and Dodge dealership facility on Grand River Road. And as part of those improvements, there was a need to do some stream improvements somewhere within the city. So as city civil engineers, we were able to develop that partnership between Farmington Hills and the Suburban Collection to find a candidate site. We looked at 7 or 8 different possible sites on public property within the city, and this was chosen as the best location.
Right, and it's a pretty exciting project. There's a lot of work that's already been done on it that visitors are seeing. So can you talk a little bit more about why wetland restoration and preservation is so important?
Well, I think that preservation is critical, and it's a key part of the watershed planning process, which this watershed has been a part of for a number of years, and the city has been a key stakeholder in trying to implement some of those improvements. But the stream, or the wetland in this case, actually has a small stream running through it as well, which makes it even more important. That wetland and floodplain area really serves as kind of a sponge that helps to absorb excess stormwater runoff, helps to filter and improve water quality, and really helps to benefit the Rouge River flowing through the city, which is one of its great assets.
Right, and I think a lot of community members don't realize how important it is that we treat the land really well, because whatever we do to the land is going to directly impact our watershed. And so I think that connection that they're able to see right here in Heritage Park is really important. So can you give us just an overview of the project that's going on right here in Heritage Park?
Sure. This site is really a very unique small tributary flowing through a wooded ravine in the north part of the park. And from that ravine, it spreads out into a much wider valley that has muck soils and I think historically the wetland area was farmed, so there are some real impacts to the area, invasive species that we saw, and real disturbances that had occurred in the near past. And then with the site, we tried to look at the overall impairments, what was going on there, and the key was what was causing those problems. Years ago, it seemed that a boardwalk was built within the wetlands, and that's a good thing, I think, to have public awareness and access to these natural areas. But sometimes how a boardwalk is put in can help or have an impact as well. In this case, usually wetland access areas, boardwalks are the way to go. But given that this boardwalk actually crossed the stream location, what ended up happening is the boardwalk shaded out some of the existing vegetation, and you had a bare area. The water follows a path of least resistance, and as it does that, it created a gully underneath the boardwalk, and it started eroding more and more. And this gully was about 4 feet deep when it was done, and we estimated about 300 tons of sediment had been washed into the Rouge River over time. And so about 450-foot long gully was created, and as part of this project we restored almost 600 feet of stream through the wetland area, put in some small offline vernal pools that provide the amphibian type of habitat. And so the gully, rather than just being filled in, it was kind of plugged with clay plugs intermittently and created this little chain of vernal pools off to the side. And the stream is restored as a series of small meandering streams. Really, there's 5 or 6 streams in one that are flowing through the wetland because it's such a steep floodplain area.
Right.
And that matches the reference conditions that we see just further upstream.
Further upstream.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of folks also don't realize that sediment itself can be a form of pollution. You think of soil in the water, you don't realize that that also can be really detrimental to a habitat and to a watershed. So I think it was a really important project here in Heritage Park to restore that wetland and prevent that sediment from washing right into the Rouge River.
Yes.
And also folks really did enjoy the old boardwalk that we had here. You know, it was an observation opportunity for them to see and listen to some of the amphibians that you're talking about that live in a wetland habitat, or aquatic birds. So I think it's important that, you know, to make it into an observation area again, like you are for the project. So can you tell us just a little bit about why that old boardwalk structure needed to be taken down? Because I think that's what a lot of people have been asking here at the Nature Center,
Right.
because that boardwalk was such a staple here for such a long time, and them not being able to understand why we would take it down and put another observation area in. So can you talk a little bit about that and why it was taken down?
Yeah, so as this gully formed through there, it eroded a lot of the pilings that were holding it in place. It became an unstable, unsafe structure in itself to leave in place, so it had been boarded off for a number of years and wasn't usable anymore. But because of the location of where it was placed, it ended up, you know, creating these erosion problems. So relocating it really helped. Now, rather than having an extensive boardwalk going across the stream, there is more of an overlook type structure that still allows views, and you can get out enough to see the entire wetland and stream area, but it provides that accessibility without the impacts to the wetland.
Right, and just now looking at, and folks can go see this restoration project in its stages happening as we speak, and just going down to the observation deck that's been put there now, you can already see aquatic birds, migratory birds taking advantage of the vernal pools that you mentioned, and also different reptiles and amphibians, even small mammals kind of taking advantage of the area, and we haven't even seen it fully restored yet. Are there any other environmental impacts that the boardwalk caused? Because I know you did mention invasive species.
Right.
Are there any invasives in particular that you've noticed taking over the habitat?
There were, and the boardwalk may be indirectly causing this excessive sediment to go downstream. Though anywhere that you have these disturbances can be an area where it can create, you know, the opportunity for these invasives to come in. There were some pocket phragmites and buckthorn, a lot of woody, autumn olive, and other types of species
Right.
that were spread around the margins of the valley. But then down within the wetlands itself, you can see extensive areas of reed canary grass, which really takes
Right.
over as a monoculture. And a lot of people would just see that as a green, you know, grass cover. But because it doesn't allow for any vegetation diversity, it really has a long-term impact on habitat. So it's one of the most challenging ones to try to control.
Absolutely, yeah, and I know that just invasives in general can be one of the most challenging aspects of any restoration project. So I think it's going to be a huge effort to make sure that those invasives stay out of the habitat and making sure that the natives thrive in there. So it sounds like there's a lot going on with the project. What is your role specifically in the project?
Well, I'm an environmental scientist, and I work with HRC doing stream restoration design. And so I worked with the contractor, who was Inland Lakes, who did a great job constructing the project. They do a lot of lake and stream projects in southeast Michigan, and working with them to help lay out the project, explain it to them, go through and work on the permitting, work with those agencies, as well as coordinating with the city staff and preparing a plan of what to do that would address the underlying causes of the environmental degradation.
Right. And I think planning is really important because, you know, back when the boardwalk was first put in, you might not have been able to see what effect that boardwalk was going to have down the road. So I think that planning process is also very important. So with that, what environmental changes can we expect to see when the wetland restoration project is complete?
Well, it's going to be a 5-year maintenance program for the vegetation that the suburban collection is committed to. So it's really quite an effort out there.
Yeah,
and
great.
We're working with great consulting firm Wild Type, who's helping develop that vegetation management plan. At this stage, because of the timing of the year, we've gone through and established a native cover crop of wild grasses, and that's going to establish this fall. And then in the spring, there may be additional management required. So as that progresses, we'll be adding more diversity through next summer and additional plantings, shrub plantings, and overseeding with wetland species and adding those diverse plantings over the next few years and managing and inspecting the site each year as well.
And it sounds like there's a lot of great partnerships going on with this project, and you mentioned Wild Type as one, and they're a pretty well-known native plant nursery, and they always promote native seeds and seeds to spread in Michigan, which are, you know, it's a great opportunity to restore our native ecosystem. So I think it's a great partner to have with this project too. So you mentioned that it's a 5-year plan. So can we expect that the wetland will be fully restored in 5 years, or will it be less or more, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that hydrologically, the wetland is currently restored now.
Okay.
There may be some overwinter maintenance. We expect typically to go back in, do some erosion control and some touch-ups in the spring. That's very typical. But hydrologically, the entire wetland was drained almost 3 acres as of this past summer, and now the groundwater tables raised way back up. You can see in these pools the water levels right up top, and that really helps those plants to take right off. And
you can already see them sprouting up through the seed that was spread, so it's pretty exciting.
And I think that with trying to get the natives reestablished, that is a multi-year process, and it's going to continue to get better and better.
Can you explain to us what the hydrologic restoration is?
Well, by that I'm referring to really restoring the groundwater table. At this site, because it was drained by this 4-foot deep gully, all of the wetland area ended up being dry. It's like when an agricultural field, a ditch is put in, it can drain quite a large area, and almost 3 acres of the wetland was being drained. So by plugging that up with clay and putting these series of dams in, we've raised up the groundwater table right to below the surface of the water. And by looking at these ponds, you can see that the soil is now saturated again, and that's what's going to restore the ability for that wetland vegetation to take off.
I think it's also important for folks to realize that Suburban Collection is funding the project, and that their tax dollars aren't going to fund the wetland restoration project, so it's a great partnership for us.
Well, and another partnership that I just thought of is that the city has coordinated several volunteers to go out and manage buckthorn, and those efforts have been going on areas just upstream of the site, so that's been really helpful as well.
And that's definitely been a key area that we've been focusing on. Here at the Nature Center, we have monthly volunteer days as well as community service help that we can go out and work on buckthorn removal. So not only do we cut the buckthorn down, but we treat it, making sure that it doesn't come back, focusing on that area specifically so that it'll help with the buckthorn not moving back into that restored wetland. And then once that area, the buckthorn's eradicated, we're kind of moving southward down into the park. And a lot of our regular visitors know that we do have a lot of buckthorn here in our park. There's a lot of disturbed areas where it came in, so I think it's exciting that we're able to remove it from that section and then start moving downward in the park.
Well, that's great.
So yeah, I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing a little bit more information with us. I think folks will really be excited to learn more about this and watch it as it moves along.
Great,
Thanks
thank you.
for coming on. Thanks for watching this episode of Nature in the Hills.